SimWorld presents Around the Table with E and the Fat Man.
What's up, everybody? It's me, it's the B.O.B., and I'm here with my man E. Eric, how are you doing on this Sunday afternoon?
I am doing well. I'm excited for fall Sundays football. And I think that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, isn't it, Bob?
Yeah, a little bit of football. In case this is your first time tuning into us, we are E and the Fat Man. This is Around the Table. We talk a little bit about SimWorld, a little bit about the real world. But like he said today, we're going to talk a little bit about pro football, the NFL. What are your thoughts on this upcoming season?
Well, as a Cowboys fan, I was a lot more excited before Tyron Smith, our best offensive lineman, ripped the muscle from his bone, apparently.
Yeah.
One of those kind of injuries.
Just
So
a
they say he's
little one.
Yeah. Well, they say he's coming back in December. I think he's coming back. I think he's coming back to a. He'll be wearing a suit and on the sideline when we next see him.
He'll be patrolling the sidelines.
Yeah, maybe an assistant coaching role or something like that would be good. But how about the NFC for a minute? I do like my Cowboys this year. I think they'll be actually the equal of what they did last year, but have to say I don't see them coming out. If I have to pick one team out of the NFC, I actually am liking them. A little bit of a surprise this year. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Minnesota Vikings. New head coach in town, Kevin O'Connell from the Rams, the Sean McVay coaching tree. I think he's really going to let that offense open up. And I think you're going to see a nice year from Kirk Cousins. I think you're going to see a nice year from Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, and others. And in the NFC, anyway, I'm liking the Minnesota Vikings this year. Bob, who's your team? I don't even know. You got to be a fan of somebody.
Yeah, well, interesting that you brought up the Vikings because that is my favorite team.
Oh, well, you're super happy with me.
Yeah, I am. But that you sound like every year it always sounds like it's going to be the year. This will be the year. This will be the year. And it's like, it's always the Packers year at the end of the season. Every 5 years or so, it's the Vikings. Every other 5 years or so, it's the Bears. It's never the Lions. The Vikings. I mean, we have a lot of talent. I'll be interested to see how the defense plays with. I'm not a big fan of the 3-4 defense personally, which we've switched to, but we have a ton of talent just across the board. It's going to be a matter of if our offensive line can do anything because we have never – I can't remember. It's been 10 years since we've been able to put a half-decent offensive line on the field. Gone are the days of us having Bryant McKinney, Stephen Hutchinson, Matt Burke, the Phil Load. Gone are those days. But we do have a good young core on the offensive line. So I'm hoping. I think
if you can get a C+ performance out of that line, that's all you'll need to have a nice year. Actually, and I think your general point is absolutely true.
And if Cook can stay healthy, I know he's been doing better, but I mean his first 2 years.
Yeah.
Lost him to injury, but
that kid's been dislocating his shoulder since high school with regularity. That's true. He has been doing that.
Well,
so if I like the Vikings based upon analysis, and you like them based upon being a homer, that's the NFC covered. What about the AFC? You got anybody on the other side you're liking this year?
You know, I think it is so up in the air. Actually, I'm not even going to say it's not up in the air. I think it has to be Buffalo coming out. I would jump back to the NFC real quick. I'm picking the Vikings, but it's just because I'm being a homer. They're going to lose in the first round or the NFC Championship game in heartbreaking fashion like we do when we get there. But yeah, I mean the AFC. It has to be Buffalo. You look at all the other divisions, and I just think they're gonna shoot themselves in the foot. Obviously, with Wilson going to Denver, that division is like, all the best teams are gonna be there. They might all be the best teams, but they all have to play each other twice. So I believe that there might only be one, maybe two teams at the most, or obviously one, maybe two teams coming out of the AFC West. I think it's Buffalo and then everybody else.
Yeah, Well, this is kind of annoying, Bob. We're agreeing so far. I like Buffalo out of the AFC this year too. Just lots of talent on that team. I mean, just look at the wide receivers alone between Diggs, Gabriel Davis. I think going to have a monster year. Isaiah McKenzie, remember that name because he's going to catch 90 or 100 passes before this year is over.
Is Knox still there? Or they still have Knox as their tight end?
Dawson Knox as your tight end. Yes. No. Like I said, there's loads of big time talent in Buffalo. That said, Kansas City I think will be good. I think Las Vegas will be surprisingly good. And even in the AFC East, the Patriots will be halfway decent. I could see them as a wild card team, at least pushing Buffalo. But end of the day, yeah, I've got the Bills coming out of the AFC as well. And look what this creates as far as my Super Bowl matchup, Bob. I got Buffalo and Minnesota. Two teams legendary for never winning a Super Bowl. They would go into that game a combined 0-8 in Super Bowl appearances, but somebody would have to win it. And this is where I'm going to break your heart a little bit. I see Buffalo triumphing over the Vikings in the Super Bowl this year, taking home a first title and dropping the poor Vikings. Their first Super Bowl loss since Bud Gratt left town, but 0-5 now. That's what I have for the Super Bowl. Sounds like you maybe have a slightly different, maybe somebody else coming out of the AFC?
No, so I will disagree that if the Bills and the Vikings make the Super Bowl, that either one of them will have to walk away because obviously history tells us they're garbage in the Super Bowl. So something will happen where if Buffalo and Minnesota end up in the Super Bowl, something's going to happen where neither team is going to win.
Neither team can win.
It's going to be a continuous overtime game where we'll be here till I die with that game still going on. But no, I believe that Buffalo and Minnesota Super Bowl is a very good choice. Again, I think all the other teams are really going to beat themselves up. I kind of disagree that New England's going to be the one to push Buffalo. This is a make or break year for Tua Tagovailoa, but I think that Miami is going to be slightly better than New England. But at the end of the day, I think Buffalo 13 wins. I think they're going to get 13 wins. And I think that they have a possibility of sweeping their division. But yeah, no, I'm with you again. We're agreeing today. Buffalo, Minnesota. but I have to stay with the homer in me and say the Vikings will pull it out.
Walk away with it.
We can't let Diggs get a Super Bowl before us.
Well, all right. So there's our overview of the real world of NFL football. How about the fake world, fantasy? About 40 million people play in that game in the U.S. and Canada. I've been a big player myself. I've been playing for decades, Bob.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, anybody out there that your fantasy draft you just gotta grab? Is there who's your top players coming in for this year? And should say too, if you're listening in and you're not that into fantasy, basically what we're discussing, who's going to be the top offensive stars to break out this year?
So I think I'll give a couple with the main positions. I'll start with wide receiver because I feel like that's a little bit more clear cut. I mean, Justin Jefferson is a must in my opinion. You have to look at the total talent on the team. I just think with what the Vikings have, he's just going to be wide open. Plus the new offense. If we can get anything. If you put Justin Jefferson in Cooper Kupp's role, Jefferson's going for 2,000 yards. And I think that's what we're going to see. I believe that we'll see just the first receiver hit 2,000 receiving yards, and it's going to be Justin Jefferson. And I don't think it's going to be close. I think he's going to – I know we got the extra game. I think he's going to hit it before the final game, honestly. I think we have to look – we're not giving Pittsburgh enough credit. They have a lot of talent at the receiver position. I'm going to actually backtrack. The fact that I'm even saying this right now, because I think they do have a lot of talent, but who's going to be the guy? And I don't think there's a guy. Like Jefferson's the guy. Adam Thielen's good, but Jefferson is the guy. The Steelers have a bunch of solid players. Quarterback-wise,
Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. Yeah, there's a loaded wide receiver room there for sure.
Absolutely. Quarterback-wise, I mean, you got Stafford. I think Derek Carr could be a surprise this year. I think he could be a top 3 quarterback in fantasy. I just think that they have a ton of talent there now with Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow. I cannot think of his name right off. Darren Waller at tight end.
Yeah.
They have so much talent. I think the addition of Devontae Adams is huge, and I think it's going to shoot him up the boards.
Yep, completely agree with that. I think people forget about the fact that Carr and Adams played together in college and put up video game numbers
and then
when they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to wrap it up with like the running backs, I think the hard thing is, and I am old school football, run the ball. You need that number one guy punching you in the mouth. There aren't many of them. Of the number one guys, they can't stay healthy. So, honestly, I think if you just put 64 running backs on a little board and spin it, you have to hope that Christian McCaffrey stays healthy. You have to hope that Saquon Barkley stays healthy. You have to hope that Dalvin Cook stays healthy. Derrick Henry is not healthy right now. Derrick Henry is that quintessential number one running back that you want on every down. He's not healthy. We don't know. We're getting away from the running game, and it's a little sad. Sad about it.
You named a couple guys that are also on my list. Devontae Adams definitely being up on there. Again, I think if anything, hey, we'll see. Maybe I'll have to eat these words later this year, but I actually think going to Derek Carr from Aaron Rodgers, you'll see a bump in Adams' performance. I truly believe that. Huge Devontae Adams fan. I like where he's ended up. I think he's going to be big. Like you, I think that Las Vegas...
Is that a fat joke? Big like me?
No.
Oh, okay. I see what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's Rick Blaze's territory. I'm not gonna pinch his
pizza.
I'm not gonna bite on him there. But outside of that, there are a few other people. One of my absolute must-have unicorns this year, Kyle Pitts, tight end out of Atlanta. The kid went over 1,000 yards last year, only had one touchdown. That one touchdown is a fluke. He is going to rack up at least a half dozen, and I think he could put up 1,500 yards in the second year here. He's unguardable. He's great. Expecting big things from him. And you were talking a little bit about Miami, too, and running backs. And, look, you're absolutely correct. Everybody from the top guys, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, the guys you were just talking about, everybody's an injury risk. Yeah. Anybody could go down at any time.
Yep.
For that reason, if we're talking fantasy football, I like to get my running backs later. Two guys who I think are going to have really nice years that you're going to be able to get later. You're not going to have to spend a first or second round draft pick to get. Is going to be Chase Edmonds in Miami. They've signed Edmonds away. He'd been in Arizona before that. He's definitely going to be the third down back at a minimum, but I actually think he's going to get a lot more action than that. They really believe in him there. And then Rashad Penny up in Seattle.
Yeah,
I think he's going to have a nice year as well. I think Seattle's going to be maybe 4-14 or 4-13 whenever this is all over. Not going to be a good year up there, but I think he will have a nice season. The line is okay-ish. I think he's going to be the bell cow. Pete Carroll doesn't like to play rookies if he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to worry that much about the kid from Michigan State who's there, who's he's probably the future, but if you want to play the present, Rashad Penny's your guy and go with him there. So, all right, these are my must-haves. Talking about some must-avoid guys, and for me, I don't think he's going to have a bad year. I don't think the Packers are going to have a bad year, but Aaron Jones, I just don't like what's going on there with the A.J. Dillon situation. I mean, look, I'm saying avoid him, and maybe Aaron Jones will score 15 touchdowns this year, but if he does, I feel like Dillon's going to get 15 too. And are the Packers really going to run the ball in 30 times this season? I don't know. I just think that's going to be a really equal timeshare. I don't like the idea of overpaying for Aaron Jones. And then the second isn't a player; it's a category, and it's quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I think that there's a huge amount of parity from I mean, look, obviously, you could have a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen go off for more than 50 touchdowns this year. But I think that there's just a lot of guys who I feel like are a pretty safe floor to get me 30, could get me around 40 or, a little more than that, which is the Mahomes, Allen on down to Dak Prescott class. Yeah. But again, if you're playing fantasy this year, my advice, go back to that Viking well. I think that Kirk Cousins could sneakily be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in fantasy football this year. Again, it was pretty well known that he didn't get along at all with the prior coaching regime.
Oh yeah.
Mike Zimmer. And it looks like he's gonna have the handcuffs taken off under the new O'Connell offense.
Absolutely.
So get him late. Sit on him and see if he's not as good as one of those guys people spend an early round pick on. So that's my avoids right there. Aaron Jones and quarterbacks generally.
Yeah, I'll have to say I agree with the Cousins pick. I picked him up late in the one draft that I've done so far this year. Obviously, it was a keeper draft, and I had Lamar Jackson. I had to keep him.
Okay.
I end up with Kirk Cousins. I picked up a third quarterback that I don't know if I want to mention with the final pick of the draft. But we'll see in 11 weeks if it was a good choice.
Okay.
See if there's rust that Watson has to shake off whenever he comes back in.
That's right.
But anyways, obviously,
yes,
we are a SimWorld-ish show right now. We've had a ton of talented players come through SimWorld in our first season, but some of them are not going to go on and continue playing basketball. Some of them were better football players than they were basketball players. And that's not a knock on them at all, but sometimes there's another sport that you're just better at, or maybe they're more focused on that sport. Are there any players that you think are going to, or maybe that we should remember coming into this the next 3 years, I should say, since they have to stay for 3 years?
Yes, this is true. So I think that there are a couple guys, and there were even a few that I remember seeing and called out during the season last year, broadcasting games. Top of the list for me is Lamont Randall. Now, the reason he's top of my own list is because he is actually related to former Dallas Cowboys running back Joseph Randall. Now, the end of Joseph's career and his current incarceration is a little unfortunate. I won't dwell on that. You can go to Wikipedia if you want to learn more. But from that family tree with some of those genetics, you can see it. Now, Lamont Randall, fairly big, 6'3", but like his well-known relative Joseph, looking to be a running back as well, and going to Georgia Southern, think he will do well there. So definitely Lamont Randall. And should mention too, he came off the bench for Miami last season, now known as the Yacht Club, and talented basketball player, but more than anything else, just a raw athlete. Just raw athletic potential. So can see why he is choosing football, and good luck to the young man going to Georgia Southern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Georgia Southern, with how talented that Lamont is athletically, Georgia Southern, I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting some very early playing time as a true freshman. Another one that I think we should talk about a little bit is Saleem Hebbard.
Yes.
6'6". He actually committed to Notre Dame. He played for the team formerly known as Detroit, the Bad Boys, last season. Talent-wise, he's 6'6". I mean, you can't teach that at all.
Nope.
And athletically, I think he's another player that could make a push to get some playing time. He might play some defensive end. I know we do see sometimes with these athletic guys, they make a switch from defense to offense. Usually, it's to play tight end or tackle. I could see him being a tight end as well. But I think he's going to start out as a defensive end or defensive tackle, but I think he's going to start on the D-line in his early career at Notre Dame.
I'll be interested to see this. I mean, he'll need to put on some weight for sure.
Yeah.
But, at 6'6", big, strong kid, and really bendy, too, which is usually important for that position to, get around the edge and collapse the pocket, get to the quarterback. So going to Notre Dame, obviously, big-time program there. Hebbard himself from Indiana, so sticking sticking close to play football. And I'm thinking, actually of everybody that we've seen in SimWorld so far, that he is probably the one with the biggest football upside. If he can grow into that frame, but still maintain his, his kind of limberness and athleticism, that would be a handful on the defensive line for anybody, Mr. Hebbard. Now, we have one other player, Hebbard going to Notre Dame, who is going to a power conference, and that is Smiley Johnson, 6'3", from Houston, and he is going to Oklahoma State. Gonna be a wide receiver there. Set some area records, I know, in Texas at the position. Not necessarily going to set the world on fire with his 40 time, but again, with that height and that kind of length and catch radius on Smiley, great possession receiver. Could see him as a slot over the middle kind of guy in the future. Big upside for Smiley Johnson, I think.
Yeah, and Gundy knows how to put an offense together. So kind of like you talked about Joseph Randall a little bit earlier. Little disappointing with how his pro career turned out, because I really thought he was going to be a guy in the NFL, because he was such a good college running back. So hopefully his cousin can do a little better. Or I called him his cousin. I don't know the relation between him and Lamont. They have the same last name. They're related somehow. But, Gundy knows how to put an offense together, so I think Smiley's going to be in very, very good hands. And we're going to see if he has what it takes to make it to the NFL. But I do want to talk. We're not going to see him playing football anytime soon, unless he suffers a head injury and forgets how to play basketball, but all of a sudden he can play pro football.
Right.
But Jay King is our own Allen Iverson. People do seem to forget Allen Iverson was a great high school quarterback. I believe he had set the Virginia state record. I want to say it was nine. He had a crazy amount of touchdowns and interceptions. For as big as he isn't,
right?
He was a ball hawk, and I think we have that in Che King. I would love to see him play a little bit of football, but we know that's not going to happen.
No, not in the G League.
Not in the G League.
He's not going to be going 2 ways in the G League. No, but like you're talking about there with Iverson, I love the fact that when you get some of these guards who can also play quarterback. I think that's a great indication that you know how to lead, you know how to set things up and run your show there. And it's not just Che King, Dominique Briscoe, who you may remember from the Dallas Stars, now the Lone Star, going to Texas Tech, won't be playing football there, but high school quarterback as well in Texas. So also, was a fairly big star. There's a couple other names that you'd know from the SimWorld world. Kids maybe you didn't know they were also high school football stars in addition to basketball, but we all remember Freddie Stonewall, right?
Yeah.
6'5", swing kind of guard forward. He's going to Houston, joining that University of Houston Kelvin Sampson loaded class coming in. But he too was a talented wide receiver, which was also the case with Scoochie Nelson. Scoochie Nelson, also about the same size, big kid, 6'5", going to Stanford now. He had been on the Midwest Select Squad, which is now going to be known as Heartland, but another basketball player, got it done on the gridiron as well. Record-setting high school wide receiver, holds the all-time record at least for his school. Again, has no intention that I've heard playing 2 sports out at Stanford, but probably could if he was so motivated. Not so surprising. Some of these kids just elite level athletes. They could probably be stars at shuffleboard if they really put their mind to it. So can't be too surprised they're going both ways like this. But yeah, I like this. I like this intersection of football and basketball we have going here.
I do want to, because I had to know. In my mind, I want to jump back to that Iverson record that I was talking about earlier, and I was going with a high touchdown number because in my mind it was an interception record. But I'm like, that's a ridiculous amount of interceptions, so it had to be touchdowns. So Iverson had the Virginia State record, or has, I would assume nobody has broken it, 7 interceptions in one game.
A single game,
and that's I was hesitant to say interceptions earlier because that 7 is just like 7 is too many. So I'm like, maybe it was like 10 touchdowns or something, but no, 7 interceptions.
The biggest takeaway for me on that is coach on the other side. Like, don't you just stop throwing the football, or at least throwing it towards him?
Well, I mean, how big he wasn't big. Period.
I'm 11.
How big was he in high school?
5'10", 5'9".
I mean, you say
big enough.
That's who you want to pick on that guy. But I would say probably after the 3rd interception, you're probably like, I think you should just throw it to the other side of the field.
Or maybe the 5th one. Maybe the 5th one. We just start running the ball.
Well, maybe he was just that much faster than everybody. It didn't matter.
Yeah, just go from one side of the field to the other.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know what, E? I feel like we had a pretty good conversation here.
I think we did.
The one thing actually that we didn't talk about, which I think we can tie up this basketball and pro thing, or the basketball and the football thing one more time, is we didn't talk about any of the great basketball players who made great football players. They didn't even have to make great football players. Just, are there any that stuck out to you that you can remember?
Well, I mean, I think if you're talking sort of greatest all time to do both, you'd be hard pressed to argue that Antonio Gates.
Yeah.
Gates had a nice college career. He actually was at a handful of different schools. Ended up at Kent State though. Got him into the NCAA tournament. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then of course had that fantastic career with the Chargers, the then San Diego Chargers. But if I actually had to pick one guy out though, I might go with Julius Peppers.
Yeah.
If you remember Peppers, defensive lineman, had an impressive NFL career, but he was actually an important part of some really good North Carolina basketball teams as well. A couple years he played basketball with them, where he was a key cog in some teams that I think won some titles, some ACC championships, had some nice tournament runs. So if we're picking just my personal, like I said, I think if you had to pick all-time great, and there's a couple other to compete with him, I'd say Antonio Gates. My own personal favorite might be Julius Peppers, though.
Huh. Yeah, and for me, I think I have to go with Antonio Gates myself too. He was just the quintessential. I don't want to say quintessential. I think he was one of the trailblazers at the tight end position. There was a guy every decade that kind of stuck out. Kellen Winslow, he obviously didn't. He wasn't basketball, but like there was a Kellen Winslow, and then it was like Antonio Gates. It was like he was the guy. Yeah. Without him, I think Phillip Rivers was a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, I really do. But without Antonio Gates, I don't know if they would.
He has the kind of career he has. Yeah, fair enough.
He still had one of the greatest running backs of all time playing behind him too, with LaDainian Tomlinson.
LT was good that way. Yeah.
But Antonio Gates, you never heard about him getting in any kind of trouble, anything like that. He did what he had. He came in, did his job, and that was it. But other one, it's interesting that basketball players transition to a particular position better than others. Antonio Gates, arguably, I'd say top 5. He's top 5 tight end of all time. Tony Gonzalez, it's kind of hard to argue him.
One.
I'm gonna just do a blanket. Like he's a top 5 top 5 tight end of all time. They're 2 of the greatest receiving tight ends ever. They're probably 1, 2. If you think of tight ends, most people, and it could be recency bias, whatever, but Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez, you're probably taking one of them 1, one of them 2. There's really not a whole lot of other tight ends. I mean, Gronkowski now, I guess. Now that I say that, you're probably going to take them both 1 and 2. I start thinking of more. But they are...
No one would criticize that 1-2 selection. I'll put it that way. No.
But it's not like whenever I would pick Ryan Leaf over Peyton Manning. I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, yeah.
Well, hopefully none of the suggestions we've made for you in fantasy or otherwise are going to be as terrible as take Leaf over Manning. But, well, this has been fun, Bob. I'm glad we got a chance to talk a little bit of football. Hope everybody out there enjoyed it as well. And just want to say, as we often do, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of SimWorld. It's a blast to have you here, and we'll be coming back next weekend too, folks.
Absolutely. If you guys have any recommendations for us, let us know in our Discord channel. If you want to be on the show, reach out to us. Let us know. We'll have some fun. But until then, everybody, be good and have a good weekend.
Later, folks.